List Boeing 767 Oral Question Study Guide, Autoflight. With the bank limit selector on the MCP in Auto and the heading Select Mode engaged, bank angle will vary from blank to blank degrees and is a function of true airspeed. 15 to 25. Question 2. How many flight control computers does the 767 have? 3. Question 3. When using auto throttles during an auto land, approach speed corrections for wind are not required, as sufficient gust protection is available with auto throttle engaged by using VREF plus 5 knots. Proof. With the approach switch pushed on the MCP prior to localizer and glide slope capture, what will be indicated on the FMA? Loc and glide slope will be indicated in white underneath the respective lateral and vertical FMA modes. Question 5. What kind of trim is prohibited with the autopilot engaged? Use of aileron trim is prohibited with the autopilot engaged. Question 6. On the ground, with no autopilot engaged and flight director off, the first flight director switch turned on activates the flight director in which mode? What will be indicated on the FMAs? Blank, takeoff, FD. Question 7. The bank limit selector affects which modes? Only heading select mode. Question 8. When are the AutoLand status annunciators normally blank? All normal autopilot modes except approach below 1500 feet. Question 9. When does go around thrust mode enunciate on the ICAS? Go around thrust indicates on the ICAS anytime flaps are out of up. Question 10. During takeoff in the N1 mode, which of the following will cause the auto throttle system to stop advancing the thrust levers? Either engine reaches the takeoff N1 limit or 80 knots, whichever occurs first. Question 11. During takeoff, when is the thrust hold mode engaged? At 80 knots. Question 12. What factors limit thrust when the auto throttle is in the EPR/N1 mode and climb thrust is selected on the thrust mode selector panel? Climb limit N1, flap placard speeds, and VMO, MMO. Question 13. In VNAV, what does the AFDS use to get its commands with regards to vertical mode and speed? The AFDS gets vertical path and speed information from the FMC. Intervention by the pilot can be accomplished through changes on the MCP or changing the constraints in the FMC. Question 14. During an ILS autoland approach, at what approximate altitude does the autopilot enter the runway alignment mode? 500 feet. Question 15. At approximately what radio altitude does the autopilot start the landing flare? 50 feet. Question 16. What is the autopilot flare active mode enunciated to the pilots? How is the autopilot flare active mode enunciated to the pilots? Flare replaces GS or glide slope on the FMAs. Question 17. What is the FMA enunciation indicating the auto throttle system is retarding the thrust levers during the landing flare? Idle. Question 18. How can the crew get the localizer and glide slope deviation scales displayed on the ADIs? Select an ILS frequency on the ILS tuning head. Question 19. When go-around mode is engaged, the auto throttle does what? Controls thrust to maintain 2,000 feet per minute climb. Question 20. In order for Land 3 to be active, which of the following events must have occurred? Radar altimeter less than 1,500 feet. and glide slope and localizer must be captured. Question 21. Which controls do the autopilots use to track the localizer center line in the rollout mode? Rudder and nose wheel steering. Question 22. During an ILS approach, what will occur if the go-around switch is pushed after the aircraft has been below 5 feet RA for more than 2 seconds? The autopilot pitch mode will remain in flare, and the auto throttle go-around mode will engage. Yes, that's bad. Question 23. After an auto land landing, which one of the following is required to disengage the operating AFDS mode? Disengage all autopilots and turn off both flight directors. Question 24. How is the auto throttle normally disengaged after an automatic landing? By selecting reverse thrust. Question 25. How can you deselect the approach mode after localizer and glide slope capture? Select go around switch or autopilot off and simultaneously select both flight directors off, then on. Question 26. On a non-GPS aircraft, how is the runway position updated prior to takeoff? Pushing the throttle N1/EPR switch. Question 27. How can you disarm LNAV, VNAV, LOC, and approach modes when armed and prior to capture? Push the mode switch a second time. What pitch is commanded by the AFDS when go around is selected in a wind shear recovery on approach? 15 degrees pitch up or slightly below the pitch limit, whichever is lower. Question 29. Describe the condition that would cause VNAV out to display as the pitch mode. A conflict occurs between the VNAV profile and MCP altitude, i.e. an intermediate level off. Question 30. If in level flight with both flight directors off, which pitch and roll modes will the autopilot engage in when commanded on? Vertical speed and heading hold. Question 31. After takeoff, when may the autopilot be engaged? Only above 250 feet AGL and vertical mode selected, typically at 1,000 feet. Question 32. When does the ALT alt light on each altimeter illuminate? 900 feet prior to the MCP selected altitude. Question 33. What occurs when the auto throttle switch is moved off? Power is removed from the auto throttle servo system. Question 38. At the start of the takeoff roll, the N1 switch is pushed after manually spooling up the engines to approximately what N1? Both engines stable at 70%. Question 39. What does the throttle hold mode accomplish? Removes power from the auto throttle servo system. That ends the auto flight system.